Within the past 4 years, we've lost some of Nintendo's most overlooked, talented development studios. While not directly owned by Nintendo, each studio had an exclusive partnership with them, making games almost, if not exclusive to their platforms. These recent developers were AlphaDream, Skip, and Vanpool. While each studio had their own reason for going out, some more clear than others, it's genuinely concerning how many people have been losing jobs because of all these companies going out. Today, I want to look into these studios one by one and discuss their downfall and how Nintendo was linked to it. But first, let's go more in depth on what the meaning of a second-party video game studio really is. Second-party video game developers are game studios that take development contracts from platform holders and develop games exclusive to that platform. Some of these studios are more close than others, but there have been much more niche studios that have been contracted to work on games for the company. These 3 studios I'm bringing up today all had extremely close relationships with Nintendo, making most, if not all, of their games on their platforms, which makes it even more suspicious of their absences. Now that we got the introduction out of the way, let's look through them in order. Ah yes, AlphaDream. I've already talked about them on my channel multiple times, and yes, I will continue to do so for a very long time. I won't go super in depth, but I'm sure we're all aware by now about the rise and fall of the studio. Obviously, they had a much more specific reason for their disappearance, but there's one key factor in the story that not many people talk about, which is concerning. AlphaDream was formed in 2000 by a group of old Square devs, made games almost exclusively for Nintendo, and was best known for the Mario & Luigi RPG spin-offs with 7 games total. The studio was doing fine by 2015. Their recent project, Mario & Luigi Dream Team, sold over 2.6 million copies, making it one of the best-selling games on the 3DS. Then, after 2015, Mario & Luigi Paper Jam released, only to sell a little bit over 1 million copies, which was still really great. But after the success of Dream Team, AlphaDream and Nintendo were likely expecting more. We didn't know at the time, but around this time began AlphaDream's financial struggles. After a 3DS remake of Superstar Saga in 2017, it was cited that back in March of 2018, the company has accumulated over $3.7 million worth of debt. How did they get this much debt? We know that Dream Team was a really big project for them, taking a lot of time, especially on sprites. And Paper Jam was likely the same in certain aspects. But this much debt is kinda insane for a small studio like AlphaDream. Maybe there was a much more logical reason, like to my knowledge CDream never had investors or anything similar, so they weren't there to financially fund them. And it appeared the CEO randomly left in 2017, leaving the company to the COO, and maybe that CEO had something to do with it, but I'm probably just looking into things too deep. Point is, things weren't looking good for them. AlphaDream chose to remake Bowser's Inside Story for 3DS instead of the Switch. They picked Bowser's Inside Story because it was the best-selling game in the series. This normally isn't a problem, but they chose to do it in 2019 when the system was practically dead and the Switch was thriving. Nintendo does assist in developing these games obviously, but the involvement is limited to usually just the producer and overall supervisors. They don't likely exactly develop the games, but Nintendo does probably help with funding. So, the remake of Bowser's Inside Story performed awfully, and it only gave the company more debt. After this remake, something must have happened with the relationship between AlphaDream and Nintendo. After the remakes flopped, they'd only produced 2 more titles, none involved Nintendo. They worked on Kanama no Kanjiro Fit and Run, which was a pretty fun mobile game, and while they weren't the sole developers, they definitely did contribute a sizable amount. Then, they worked with Sega on Mario & Sonic at the Olympic Games 2020. AlphaDream would go on to declare bankruptcy October 1st, 2019. After that announcement, it became clear that the reason they worked on those games was a last-ditch effort to get out of debt, but unfortunately it didn't work. I've told this story like 3 other times now, and this isn't a strange disappearance, so why am I bringing this up? The answer is Nintendo's involvement in this situation. It's completely unclear what was going on behind the scenes. Did Nintendo try to help them out, but AlphaDream refused? Did Nintendo completely leave AlphaDream in the dust? Or did AlphaDream just simply not want to work with them? It's completely unknown. Even if Nintendo didn't want to pay off the studio's debt, they could have at least moved into Nintendo or another studio they own. But it seems Nintendo didn't offer that, or at least not many people went there. As someone who's looked into where dozens of these employees went, I've only seen about a few go to Nintendo. Others went to Square, Ilka, or other small companies. Wow. That ended up being a much longer explanation than I anticipated, but you get the point. For AlphaDream, it's more so the concerning factor of Nintendo's involvement during their financial crisis, which is worrying for how these other companies got treated. Now let's talk about Skip. Skip is another much smaller second-party studio, and they've been known for making the Chibi Robo games. Don't know what Chibi Robo is? That's why Skip likely went under. You'll soon understand what I mean by likely, but first a bit of backstory. Skip Limited was founded in 2000, prominently featuring former Square devs just like AlphaDream. Soon enough, they made Chibi Robo for the GameCube in 2005, not exactly being a big financial success, but did eventually gain a cult following online. Skip would go on to create other smaller games on the Wii and DS. They did try out Chibi Robo more, but for one reason or another, they flopped. For example, Chibi Robo Park Patrol was exclusive to Walmart for some reason if you wanted it in North America. After doing stuff like that a few more times, Skip released one of the worst possible video games ever conceived in 2015, Chibi Robo Ziplash. I could go on and on about how terrible this game is, but to keep it simple, it's a 2D platformer that uses Chibi Robo in the title, even though Chibi Robo is not a 2D platformer, but it's also a very terribly designed 2D platformer. Kensuke Tanabe, yes, that Kensuke Tanabe, later clarified if Ziplash didn't sell well, the future of Chibi Robo would be grim. So if people wanted Chibi Robo to actually return, they'd need to buy this bad game. And of course, no one bought the game. And after that, Skip never released another game. In 2016, Skip changed from Skip Limited to Skip Inc., which may have meant they were considering being bought out by a company or something similar, but nothing happened as a result. In 2020, Skip's website shut down and basically all hope had been lost. As now, from the recording of this video, it's been over 8 years since their last title, and even the former CEO thinks the company's gone. I'm personally very interested in what Skip was trying to do with switching to Skip Inc. Were they trying to convince Nintendo to buy them out, but they didn't? Skip was definitely out of money after Ziplash failed, and being bought or even merged into Nintendo would have saved a lot of the employees. But that didn't happen. It's genuinely really sad. The company was definitely having creative differences and possibly even crunching during the development of Ziplash, because what sane person can conceive something like that? No offense to the developers. It sucks that the game industry is like this sometimes, and I hope that everyone from Skip is either retired now or doing good in the industry. Now let's talk about the last company, and the one that really stung me, causing me to make this video, Vanpool. Vanpool was a small company that was formed in 1999. They were an iconic Nintendo support studio. Vanpool primarily made small games and assisted on big ones. More well-known games that they did develop themselves were the Dylan's Roll and Western games. But hey, they did also make the Tingle games, they were pretty good. Anyways, ever since 2019, they were only a support studio helping out HAL Laboratory with the Kirby games. Their last game ended up being Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe from earlier this year in 2023. But then, out of the blue a few months later, Vanpool announced that they would dissolve as of May 31st, 2023. This really caught everyone by surprise. Vanpool was such a staple in working on Nintendo games, it was shocking they could even disband in the first place. It's likely Vanpool is a much smaller company, probably even more small than AlphaDream and Skip, so it'd be easier to decide to disband if there weren't as many employees left. But even then, why disband? Maybe they were all offered jobs and wanted to go to Nintendo or HAL or some other studio. Or maybe a lot of them just wanted to retire, we don't know for sure. And that's what really stings, we don't really know for sure. I hate how incredibly vague they were for disbanding due to various circumstances. I just wish they could communicate better, but then again, at least they did communicate. Skip literally said nothing. Nintendo doesn't think about buying out companies the same way PlayStation and Xbox do, which is probably the best for Nintendo. It's not a smart idea to just keep buying out companies just for the sake of buying companies. Nintendo is a very specific type of studio they're looking for when they're acquiring them. One that apparently Next Level Games must have had as they were acquired back in 2021. President Furukawa had this to say about it. Our brand was built upon products crafted with dedication by our employees, and having a large number of people who don't possess Nintendo DNA in our group would not be a plus to the company. So, AlphaDream, Skip, and possibly Vanpool weren't absorbed or bought by Nintendo because they don't contain Nintendo DNA. The way their employees are, their companies operate, how they make games just doesn't align with Nintendo's DNA, so they don't purchase them. It's a sad but harsh truth. Nintendo's not just gonna buy out every company that's going under. Some of them just aren't worth it for them, regardless of how talented the studios may actually be. It doesn't matter how talented they are. There could be the most talented studio out there, but the way they are talented just doesn't fit with how Nintendo is talented. It's as simple as that. Am I disappointed by this? In some ways, yeah. I think Nintendo should at least try to help out AlphaDream and Skip, because in one way or another, Nintendo caused their demise. Nintendo was likely pushing for a 3DS game to fill out 2019 releases, and Nintendo thinking of changing up Chibi Robo to a completely different genre to gain a new audience. Obviously, we don't know how things went down behind the scenes. For all we know, it could have been Skip that wanted to go into the platformer direction with Chibi Robo. and they might have tried to help out the companies when they weren't doing great financially, but nothing seemed to work out. Sometimes you just have to move on, and hopefully everyone at each of those companies are doing okay in the industry. This one was a bit more on the depressing end, but that's all for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching.